Angela Davis, now Professor Davis, is a renowned American civil rights leader. She's in Belfast today for events in connection with International Women's Day. I've been talking to Angela Davis, and I began by asking her, what's more important, improving the lives of women or improving everyone's life?
I would argue that improving the lives of women would effectively improve the lives of all. And philosophically, I would say that this is the same dilemma that we confront when people ask whether it's better to say that Black lives matter or all lives matter. But it should be quite easy to recognize that if Black lives were ever able to matter, then that would mean that all lives matter. So I make the same argument with respect to women.
In the 1970s, you were on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. I just wonder what your 1970s self would be doing in President Trump's America.
Well, I like to think that I have maintained my principles, and although, of course, I have learned a great deal as a result of the passage of time, I still fundamentally believe that our struggle for democracy is a struggle for racial democracy, economic democracy, gender democracy. So in a sense, I would say that the work that we've done since the 1960s and the 1970s has prepared us to engage in the kind of struggles that will prevent the Trump administration from turning the clock back on all of the recent accomplishments in our history.
But I suppose the difficulty for opponents of everything President Trump symbolizes is that he was democratically elected, presumably with the votes of millions of women.
Well, certainly more women voted for Trump than I would have wanted. 53% of white women voted for Trump. But as a matter of fact, the majority of women voted against Trump. And that had a great deal to do with the fact that 94% of all Black women who voted against Trump. 68% of Latina women who voted against Trump. And at the same time, it's important for people around the world to know that the U.S. Does not have structurally the kind of democracy that accords one vote to each person. We have an obsolete electoral system that is anchored in slavery called the Electoral College, that was originally designed to guarantee that states in the South with large Black populations, that is to say large slave populations who could not vote, certainly, but small white populations would be able to achieve national leverage. And the world should know that the majority of people in the U.S. who voted against Donald Trump.
And race is still that profoundly divisive issue in the United States.
Well, it's not so much that it is divisive. It is so much a part of the major structures of our society, the economic structures, the educational structures, the structures of healthcare, the punishment structures. And this has happened because we have never engaged as a nation in an effective campaign to begin to root out the consequences of slavery and colonization. In a sense, we're beginning this process a century and a half too late.
How important is it to still have an International Women's Day? There are those who would argue that it is as important, if not more important, to make boys and men part of all of this as it is girls and young women.
Yeah, but if that part of the population that has been very specifically subject to forms of oppression, misogyny, gender injustice, if they rise up, then the entire population rises up. I think it's important for boys to recognize how important it is to support issues that relate to girls, and men. As I was saying not long ago, it's men who should be in the forefront of the campaign to eradicate gender violence, domestic violence, intimate violence. These issues are all interconnected, and historically, the language that we use has been so saturated that with misogyny that we've said things like all men are created equal, and that is supposed to represent the entire population. But we know that when we say all men are created equal, we're only talking about one gender, and we're not even talking about all men. We're talking about affluent men. We're talking about white men. So it's about time that we began to recognize that the thrust toward democracy is precisely one that acknowledges the specificity of oppression, and that of those who have what you might call male privilege or white privilege need to stand together with those who don't.
International Women's Day for me, it's a collective of women, it's a solidarity, and it reminds us of what we've won, but also what we still have to do.
I just think it's important that we're still thinking about it and celebrating it. For me personally, it just means being equally represented and having a chance to talk about these things.
Peace, justice, solidarity, freedom.
I think it's really important that a lot of women in our community are heard, especially women who aren't usually listened to, minority groups and LGBT women. And it's really nice to be here and see people talking about choice and all those different issues that women in Northern Ireland and around the world face.
It's a real time for women to come together, all women from all walks of life, race, trans women, everyone, to kind of stand up for each other's rights. So that's what it means to me. And to also recognise those great women that went before us too. They shouldn't be forgotten.
It means so much. I can hardly put it into words, but all my life in one way or another I've struggled with different issues as a woman, as a lesbian, someone who's been abused, and to have the solidarity and the power of women all over the world on this day celebrating the survival of women, it means a lot.